Got all they have to offer. Let me do that one more time. I'm gonna nail it this
No,
time.
you're good. You're good. And you can probably record that later, really. And just do the voiceover.
True.
Anyways.
I'm gonna nail it right now.
Okay, you do it.
Okay.
You do it.
This podcast is sponsored by Work in Progress. Work in Progress is an awesome co-working and event space in downtown Las Vegas. They're much more than just a place to put your laptop. It's a community of people who thrive in the startup life. A central hub where the best and brightest Las Vegans share their insights. And it's generally a pretty fun place to be if you're into that sort of thing. Check out all they have to offer at www.workinprogress.lv.
You did it.
And so welcome to Profession Unknown, episode number 4 with Kenny Eliason. I am excited to have you on, and right before this, I was talking about .lv for a TLD on a domain name. Mm-hmm. I originally saw that Work in Progress had that, and I was like, that is so cool.
Like way back.
Right, way back.
Uh-huh.
So I did it, and it was for a client, and they started getting ranked in Latvia.
Yeah,
and
it's a Latvia subdomain. It's a TLD.
I was getting all kinds of problems because they were primarily a local business.
Funny.
All their business, and so
Yeah.
I had to scrap that.
Well, what's even harder, so we didn't pick that, the previous owners did way back, but it is, to register, it's a Latvian domain registrar. Like, you have to use Google Translate to even order your domain. So
yeah, I remember going through. Here, pull this a little
it's
closer.
definitely Latvian.
You feel free to pull it down and just, there
Let's
you go.
see. Hello?
Just keep that.
Can you hear me now? Hello.
Wait.
Cool.
Perfect. So, one thing about my previous guests, a lot of them I've worked with or kind of been around a lot, and albeit we've kind of bumped into each other a lot.
Yeah.
I'm excited because a lot of your background I haven't really kind of dove into or anything like that. Yeah,
for sure.
So, is that chair less squeaky?
Yes, I think we're good. No squeaks.
Okay.
So that won't pick up.
Were you here born and raised in Vegas? Or?
Sure was. I was born and raised here. Were you?
No, I'm from Hawaii actually, but
okay.
I came here when I was 8, so pretty much a
Okay.
native.
Yeah. So I was born and raised here, up in my first half of life we were on the east side, over by like Bonanza and the Hollywood area, and then when I was like 9, we moved out to the northwest side of town. I grew up out in the northwest, so
Okay.
went to Mojave and then Centennial, and my parents and I even bought a house further out northwest, but we still live out there. So
I lived over by Texas Station, and my wife grew up over by Bonanza and stuff.
okay.
Over there,
Yep.
And yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I grew up here.
It's funny to see Vegas how big it's gotten now.
It's a trip for sure.
Back then, like
even when I went to high school, where I went to high school at Centennial High School, we were the farthest thing out in the northwest by like a mile. When we drive to school in the morning, we drove through the desert for 15 minutes to get to school practically. And now my house that I own is another 15 minutes past Centennial.
Wow.
And it's like all developed land and everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. It's grown so much.
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And a part of that, what's cool is you started a company here that. How long has NeONBRAND been around?
Yeah, we started NeONBRAND in 2011. So November 2011. So 7 years. 6 years. 7. Somebody do the math. 7 years.
And just from my research of working with clients and stuff like that, it seems like you guys have a very good foothold as far as servicing not only Las Vegas clients, but clients in general.
Yeah, we've got clients from everywhere, for sure. Yeah, we've done a lot to keep clients. I mean, you've done it too. It's all about the quality of service lots of times, not the quality of the customer service, not necessarily the quality of the code at the end of the day lots of times. People like working with somebody that they can communicate and relate to, and so we've been able to build a company on that for the past 7 years now, so it's been good.
You said is it you and a partner?
So I started off with another partner back in 2011. He had a previous company that he was closing, and I wanted to start a similar business, so we partnered up. We worked together for about 6 months, and then he left to start an app that him and a buddy had raised a ton of funding on. And they actually went a long ways with it. It ultimately didn't work out for them, but it was a really cool app, and it was a bummer it didn't work out. And then I picked up another partner about 6 months after that. He was great. We worked together for about a year, and then he ended up having to go do his own thing too. And then I was solo for a little while. Met my current business partner, Kurt Wanker, And he and I have been partners now for going on 3 years. No, going on 3.5 years now. So it's Kurt and I now running the place and buying all these other businesses and crazy things we're doing. So yeah, there's 2 of us.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
So when you were running the business alone, how difficult is that? Do you feel like having a partner is a requirement?
No, it's interesting. After my second partner leaving, I swore I'd never have a partner ever again. Apparently, I forgot one of the evers because I currently do have one. But I hated as much as I loved having partners, I hated losing partners. Like that was the worst thing. So running it by myself, yes, it was harder and everything when it's on. I mean, not only it's doable, it's just not as fun going alone. Like for me, it was a matter of like, do I enjoy when I go to work? Aside from being overwhelmed by the work stuff, is there somebody I can hang out with that can commiserate with me that can rejoice in the joyous times and commiserate with me on the bad times?
Up a little bit every
yeah. So it's been a good thing to have a partner. And Kurt is my last partner. We will never ever have another partnership ever again. Kurt and I are awesome.
Remember that last ever.
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool. So you guys do, I know, not only social media management, but marketing and brand.
Yeah, so NeONBRAND
brands as well.
When we started NeONBRAND, we started off as basically a social media company, which in 2011 was a relatively new idea. Not too many people were doing it. So we were a social media company. What ended up happening is everybody that came to us for social media work ended up needing a website. So I was outsourcing the website work, and then once we realized that sucked, I ended up becoming a developer myself and started doing websites. So then we were websites and social media. And from there, you can guess the next thing that came was SEO. And from there, the next thing was we need business cards and logos and a business plan, and it just kind of developed over time into this business development agency is kind of what we call ourselves now, to where we help. Kurt's background's more on the business side. That's where he was at before he joined NeONBRAND as my partner. He had a business consulting firm. So he managed the in-house, making sure companies were working really well. And then I helped send leads to them, essentially. And together our partnership worked out really well. But one of the things we learned about clients most of the time when they say they need SEO or they need social media or they need a new website, what they're really saying at the heart of it is we want more customers from the internet. And so we kind of built our service offerings around how do you get more customers from the internet. So when somebody comes in, it's, we look at all of the options and we say, you know what, for your specific company, you should do these 5 things. And for this other company, you should do these other 3 things that this guy's not doing. So it makes it, we're not just pushing people down an SEO path because we think that's the only thing we offer. We're available to offer different things to them as they go. So
and it doesn't seem like you're just offering them some tool or anything. You're doing the management of because I remember referring a client and you guys are so busy that you guys were like, we can't take any more business right now at this moment.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, we have manpower is our greatest asset, and so when our guys' time and gals' time get filled up, then it makes it hard to service clients to the quality that we want to. I mean, sure, we could shove more on them and clients would suffer ultimately, but we try to maintain our
Going back to that quality.
Our quote around the office, and if you ask any of our employees, if you say what's the number one thing that NeONBRAND strives to do, it's we strive to be the number one customer service organization in the world that also does X. So like it's customer service first, making sure the customers are satisfied, and then we provide websites and social media and email marketing. Those are the subsets to being a good customer service focused organization.
For sure. So before NeONBRAND, were you doing marketing related things or? So
I kind of grew up. No, the answer is no. Not for work in any way, but my dad was always a marketer at heart. So we would drive around my whole life looking at buildings or billboards or whatever it was. Did he work at an
ad agency or something?
No, he didn't. He was one of those guys that was born in the 50s that ended up working construction and doing those hard things that those guys ended up doing a lot. Education wasn't really on his game plan, so he never got to do those things, but marketing was always a super big interest to him. So I was raised with this marketing mindset where, why are they doing that? Why does that billboard say those words? I remember one of my first marketing successes, quote unquote, was my girlfriend in high school was running for senior class president. And I told her, I was like, I got this cool idea. Write your normal poster, vote for Brooke. Like, okay, cool. And then at the bottom, in small print, write, whatever you do, don't read this backwards. And it didn't make any sense at all, right? But the fact that it said that, people would stand there and say, Kurb het Tov, you know, like, and they would be like, why does it say that? And it would just make them remember her more, right?
Okay.
And so that was an early taste of what marketing power there was. And, you know, ever since then, it's just kind of been in the back of my mind. And for a long time, it wasn't my focus at all. I mean, I think you found some of the stuff. I was not doing marketing stuff for the first 8 years of my career after high school, 9 years, 10 years even. It wasn't until we started NeONBRAND that I really got to start doing that stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So it seems like before NeONBRAND, you've even kind of built businesses and things like that too. I saw that you had built a company around
window cleaning.
So window sparkle.
Yeah,
window sparkle.
So my dad lost his job in 2008 in the recession stuff, and my dad in his craziness started one of the trampoline parks here in town called Flippin' Out. And so when he started that, I was helper. I mean, free labor for my dad's new startup that he was starting in this crazy trampoline park. And so that was my first taste of like being truly entrepreneurial and watching my dad do something that he'd always dreamed of doing his whole life. And because he lost his job, he's like, sure, why not? Let's start a crazy business while we're at it. So I learned a lot in that. And then actually my first company was NeONBRAND. Window Sparkle I acquired from a guy about 6 months into NeONBRAND. So it was this company. It was called JS Window Cleaning before, and they were going to close it. And they had a revenue. And so my thought was, well, if you've got revenue, I'll figure out how to make the work get done, but I don't want to lose that revenue. That's great. Mm-hmm. So we acquired the business, did it for a couple of years, increased the revenues, and had a couple of staffers doing all the window cleaning for us, and then eventually sold it off to another guy that had a bigger company. So that was the first taste of acquisition / selling a company that we'd had. So that was kind of fun. So that was definitely very early on right after we started NeONBRAND that we do Window Sparkle, which was crazy. We should never have done 2 businesses at once that early in NeONBRAND's life, but we did.
I can imagine organizing all of that was maddening.
I cleaned a lot of windows while I should have been building websites to make sure it got done. Had to satisfy those clients. Customer service.
Yeah. But that's too funny, man.
Yeah.
So even going a little bit further back, did you kind of go to school for anything computer science related, or did you kind of go for anything, I guess, in high school, were you at all interested in building businesses or getting into tech?
Yeah, so I was one of those late 90s kids that grew up and got our first computer when I was like 14 or something like that. No, I was probably younger. I was probably like 12, and was obsessed with AOL and all the different things you could do on these computers, right? So I had my parents got one for Christmas, and I had taken it apart and put it back together 10 times by Valentine's Day. You know, like that was the fun that I would do. And then they bought more computers, and I got into huge trouble a couple times using computers early on when I shouldn't have, doing things I shouldn't have been doing. We can say like that. Me. Yeah, we can. Yeah. Mine involved the FBI. It was really bad. No. Yeah, it was really bad. Some people that may end up seeing this might know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so that was kind of my only taste. I never took any classes in computer science. I never did anything school-related computer-wise. It was just I was always the computer guy in the family that knew stuff about computers and could figure it out. I wasn't a programmer by any means at that time. I was more hardware-focused. I built my PCs and did all that stuff for a long time. And then from school, I went to UNLV. I graduated with a bachelor's in Spanish. So I'm actually fluent in Spanish.
Cool.
Which is interesting because I learned Spanish before I learned programming. And when I learned programming later on, a few years later, it was very interesting to me, the comparison between learning a programming language and learning an actual spoken language. I think being able to speak Spanish, however much it's very different, the mentalities that are required to learn a new language verbally is the same that are applied to programming languages. You're learning to speak in a new language, essentially. So I feel like it helped me out a lot knowing the 2 languages there. But
yeah, especially since a lot of languages have like a lot of weird contextual things.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, depending on
the scenario. Exactly. Yeah, for sure. So I think I've actually asked other people about this very thing. People that are born and raised speaking more than 1 language are at a disadvantage because they, just like how I don't know why I speak English the way I speak it. I'm not an English major. I don't know the exactness to what I'm saying and speaking poorly right now, as a matter of fact, I'm sure. When you grow up speaking 2 languages, you don't understand that. But when you learn a second language later in life, even if it's teenage years, you have to learn some of those grammatical and other things that you don't know exist in a language.
Sure.
And those are the things that were more applicable to learning programming languages, where it's like, oh, you know, I have to know this certain context means this word changes to this sense. Just like, oh, when I'm doing this type of a statement, now things change. Anyways.
Well, especially since there's something empowering about learning a second language. I've never done it, but
it's a trip. It's the weirdest thing because like your brain can just go, and then all of a sudden, las palabras están en español y ya estás hablando en otro idioma. And it's so weird that I can't even believe that I can do that sometimes. So it is a very, very weird thing.
It's a trip how you think always in your native language too.
Yeah,
someone can come over and they'll be here for 10 years, you know, and they'll
still
speak
go
English
back to
all day
native.
long. And yeah.
It's weird. Yeah, there's like a translation step happening as I speak Spanish. No, that was part of my programming education was just knowing a second language. The other thing was I had a law firm job for like 8 years. Awesome place, loved it. Tingy Law Firm. They were my idols, and it was the last job I ever wanted and the best job I've ever had. I didn't plan on working there. They only hired me because I spoke Spanish, and they needed a translator. And so I started working as a translator. Ended up becoming their office manager after about a lot of years, and ran a lot of this stuff. And while I was there, it was there that I learned my love for Excel. So I love Excel, and I can build the coolest spreadsheets on the planet. And and while we were there, I mean, we built these settlement calculations. I mean, multi-page, multi-sheet, you know, all these different connections, Visual Basic a little bit. Anyways, we built these really cool spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I was training my programming brain until later on when NeONBRAND and I had to start building websites. I started looking at stuff and it's like, man, this is like Excel on steroids.
Yeah.
Like if I can write this cool stuff on a spreadsheet, I can write some freaking way cool stuff in programming,
formulas, variables, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah,
if-then statements. You know, I was a pro at writing if-then statements on
Yeah.
Excel. If-then, else. You know, the formulas we wrote there. But it just translated over. So it was those two things that really kicked off my programming. Other than that, though, none of my education or anything growing up, aside from just being loving computers, really tied me into the computer world, educationally. So.
I remember even when AOL first popped up and I was sitting in chat rooms and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, everybody always says, you know, it's like looking back, I wish I started a business back then online. You know
of
what
course.
I mean?
Yeah, right.
Talk about the cowboy days
Crazy.
back then. But I remember someone who's been a vet in programming, he's like, back then, there was no JavaScript.
No, yeah.
There was he's like, you think it was easy?
They were
like,
inventing everything. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. I actually remember being in my photography class senior year, so it would have been like 2001-ish. I'm sitting in photography class, and the teacher says, hey, guys, I want you to pull up on your computers this website. It's called google.com. Can you type that in? And we were all like, what? What? So, yeah, it was not, different world back then for sure.
Yeah. It is a trip how Google just took the world by storm, though. It's just like much like Amazon. But Amazon was a little slower, but Google, like everybody was starting to say, Google it, you know?
Yeah. That's the goal, right? We got to get a company that people turn into a verb. Like, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So was that legal, that office manager job was kind of like your first job, or you kind of had jobs
So
before
I'm
that?
kind of crazy. My jobs, so I did the Mormon mission thing from when I was 19 to 21. So there's a gap there where no jobs were had. But when I was 16, I got a job at a car dealership. And then between the ages of 16 to 19, I had probably 14 jobs. Like I rotated through. I'd get bored and I would rotate to the next. And I would get bored and rotate to the next. So actually, I said my first job was a car dealership. My first job was a moving company, like lifting people's crap from one house to the next, third floor apartment to third floor apartment. Insane stuff. So I've done all the hard stuff. And then after I got back from my mission when I was 21, I moved to Utah, worked at a car detailing shop, worked at YMCA. You know, I did all the run-of-the-mill jobs. Tingy was probably my first, like, legit. It was the longest job I'd ever had up to that point by exponential numbers. I mean, I barely made it to a year probably at any of my previous jobs, and I stayed there for like 8, almost 9 years. So it was my first grown-up job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was good. I loved it and stayed there for a long time.
Okay. That's cool. So I'm interested what kind of sparked you to build NeONBRAND.
Well, that ties into the law firm. So
okay.
So after working at the law firm for so long, it was kind of to the point where I was like, man, should I go to law school? I just graduated UNLV, and I was thinking, should I do this whole attorney thing? And none of my family are educated in upper education by any means, so it was kind of my first. Like I was kind of the cowboy trying to figure it out. I didn't have much guidance. Which bless my parents' hearts. I love them to death. They're awesome. So this is not anything bad against them. It was just my current status was I didn't know how to do this upper education kind of thing. Figured out how to graduate from college. That was awesome. And then law school comes up. And my bosses at that time pretty much said, I don't think they even remember this, but they pretty much in so many words said, if you go to law school, we'll hire you. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to figure out this law school stuff. Did the LSAT, did the prep, did all the things, got accepted to a school, California Western, down in Southern California.
You were ready.
In San Diego. I went to law school. You didn't see that coming.
Okay.
So I went to law school and loved it, but an interesting thing happened. And it's not so interesting once I tell you the punchline, but one of the things I didn't know, because I didn't really know how law school worked. Well, there's a couple things about law school that are unique. Law school is everything's graded on a curve, which is like a legit curve. Like the lowest grade's the F, the highest grade's the A, and everybody in between falls on the spectrum. So that's interesting. You put with a smart class and you're not so smart, I mean, that throws the whole curve off, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was necessarily my problem. The other problem I found out was law schools in general, all of them, at the end of the first year, there's a percentage of the class that in order to keep their bar passage rates up after graduation, in order to keep that bar passage rate up, they cut a certain percentage of the bottom of the class after the first year. So you go for a year, you pay them an exorbitant amount of money to go to their school, and then
you might get cut.
Even though
you're still kind of
even though you're still yes,
whatever, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So most law schools cut the bottom 3%. Like it's out of a class of 103 people
shave,
maybe,
yeah.
right? Like
Okay.
that's really low. The school I chose, unbeknownst to me, and I didn't even know this was a thing until it happened, cut the bottom third. So
33%.
I got kicked out of law school with a 78.7 final average grade.
gosh.
So
How
after
terrible.
the first year, I was back on the streets, baby. So my poor wife, I love her to death. She thought she married an attorney. She got me. No, so that was the spark. So I moved back to Vegas, which, man, we loved it down there in Southern California. Moved back to Vegas, started working at the law firm again. Didn't want to be a legal assistant forever. Had all these dreams and aspirations of becoming an entrepreneur and wanted to do these startups and all these other things, but didn't know how to pull the trigger. My friend had that company that I mentioned. I knew him because he had done the marketing for my dad's trampoline business. This is tying together nicely.
Okay.
And because he was doing that, I hit him up and he said, I'm actually closing it. And that was kind of the end of it. Then fast forward a couple months later, he hit me back up and he said, hey, actually, why don't we start a new company? We'll call it NeONBRAND, 50-50. We'll do this thing. It'll be me and you. And from there, if you want to know more of the story, I kept my job at the law office, so 9 to 5 at the law office. And then at nights from about 8:30, 9 o'clock till about 2 in the morning,
Moonlighting.
I would work with my Indian developers who were wide awake at that time of night, which worked out for us, to build websites and that happened for 6-7 months until my business partner landed this $60,000 app. And we had no business doing it, but he got it. And so I quit my other job and went full time and never looked back.
Good deal.
So that was the law school was the spark. I would have been an attorney had law school not kicked me out.
Yeah. Hey, when I went to go to UNLV, I took the SAT and I kept, because there's a millennial
Yes, I had
scholarship.
that. I had that.
And there was a certain, I went to a Christian homeschooling thing
Cool.
for high school, right?
Okay.
And so it was technically still like a GED or like a high school degree, excuse me. But I needed to
Pass this SAT or
yeah.
whatever.
Kept
ACT or
I
whatever.
took it 3 times and I kept missing it by 0.5 or whatever. So whatever power that be, because
Yeah.
things worked out.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't looking for computer science back then.
Right.
Even though I was kind of interested in computers.
Right.
I just didn't know computer programming was a
job.
a full-time thing,
right.
right? I thought just some,
Totally.
you don't, because the TV and media totally skews what a day-to-day
Totally.
is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
If they had
Very
a
different.
reality show of NeONBRAnd,
We've thought about starting it a bunch of times actually, and then it always comes down. Yeah, and then it all comes down to we're all too boring. Well, at least most of them are.
No, you guys are great.
No.
So I guess back to one thing I like to talk about is leadership, as far as what good things you've seen in leaders also, and what things you try to exhibit in being a boss or a manager as well. And were there things, because you said that legal job was great. What was great about it? Just the fact you weren't micromanaged or whatever? Or?
That was a big part of it. So the bosses over there, and they're still good friends today, they don't micromanage, and I think I thrived underneath that situation. I was raised to be a hard worker and to give 110% and all those kinds of things. My dad was a hard worker. My brothers are hard workers. My sisters, all of them. That was a thing in our family. So when somebody wasn't micromanaging me and just let me do my thing, I could do a lot of stuff. And so, I fixed computer problems that they didn't even know they had, or I built spreadsheets to solve situations that they weren't aware of. That was the kind of stuff I loved, and they let me have that freedom. And not only that, though, one of the other points is one of the main attorneys, Dean, he became a really good friend of mine because he was just cool. He was just like, even though he was my boss and cut my checks, he was still really nice and friends and bought me gifts and was just a nice guy to me. And even to this day, that whole relationship that he and I had has made its way into all the relationships that I have with my employees. I try to make the same type of friend relationship first with people rather than this boss and employee thing, which isn't cool for anybody. By the way, my voice isn't always this crackly. It's because of the whole head cold thing. It's not puberty. It's head cold.
You did a talk at our meetup last week.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Man, you were really like, that was the second one I did today. And I was like, this poor guy.
Yeah, that's right. Today's good.
Crushing him. Yeah.
Compared to that. But anyways, so I don't micromanage. I don't like to be micromanaged. Yeah. I don't micromanage my people. So I think that's one of our core strengths is, we empower our employees to make the best decisions that they can. Most of the time, we try. So.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've done and kind of recognized was an issue was during times of crisis or disagreements or whatever, sometimes getting a little too, whether not necessarily personal, but exhibiting basically negative, emotions about it. And as a leader, I feel like one of the things I've learned is being, whether it's almost to an extent of being truthful, but being optimistic about a lot of situations is the number one thing. And I've noticed in teams I've managed, the minute I've gone pessimistic on things, I've been like, man,
totally.
That's
clients.
where even between teams.
Yeah, right? No, but complaining about clients to a team, even that drops the mentality. No, I get what you're saying.
So are there things maybe that you've kind of seen, you don't have to say who, of course, but exhibited things like that where you've seen bad habits in managers or bosses?
Yeah, I tend to flee from those situations. That's probably why I had a lot of jobs early on too, is I don't have specific references necessarily right now off the top of my head, but personally, I'm a huge, annoyingly optimistic person. One of my things about entrepreneurship that I kind of say, if you're going to get into entrepreneurship, you have to have a level of unrealistic optimism. You have to be able to say, when everything is saying this is not going to work, for whatever reason, your crazy brain still thinks, it'll work out. It's that unrealistic optimism that helps an entrepreneur survive. So, sorry to all those around me, because that is a hard person to live with lots of times. It'll be fine. We'll be all right. Yeah, sure, we're broke this month. It'll be fine. Oh, they're going to take our house. It'll be fine. No, whatever the situation might be.
I mean, and I've dealt with it even with my family, but have you had naysayers or anything when you first started all of this, or were you pretty well supported as far as wanting to do this?
I don't think anybody specifically comes to mind as being a naysayer.
Yeah.
My wife is awesome, and she is very supportive and has, asks her questions for sure, wants to make sure my crazy hat isn't always on too tight.
Got checks,
yeah. But she's super supportive. Yeah. My friends, half of them don't know what I do and couldn't tell me if I asked them, but they're all supportive.
Memes, what they think
totally.
I do versus...
Well, I got to go one. I made one a long time ago. So not too much. I haven't had too many naysayers.
Okay, yeah. Then you must not
in
read
my
the
optimistic
comments
mind.
on social
In my
media.
optimistic mind, I don't see them. So it's like, oh, that's a half glass full kind of comment, I guess. Let's moving on.
There we go. Kind of moving on from management. I've also, just in computer science, you start to deal with different types of company cultures or just processes and pipelines, and whether it be Kanban or Agile or Scrum or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Are there things that you do now that you kind of live by, whether it be daily stand-ups or whatever, that you think are we got to do this in order to kind of stay on track as far as project management things are concerned?
I wish I had a really good answer to that. I'm a process fan, so I like processes, right? I like having a set thing of steps to accomplish a task. But when it comes to websites and marketing, that's often unfeasible and unrealistic. You just can't come up with that simple. Like, for example, here's how you give a tour of work in progress. First, you show them this. I mean, that's a very easy step to show somebody. But when it comes to a website, it's very hard. So we only recently started moving to Agile and Scrum. So we have some Scrum Agile processes implemented right now. I'm not a fan of the daily stand-ups. We actually don't do them anymore. We do sprint planning and retros and backlog planning and all that stuff. And then we do that's pretty much our sprint planning. So we don't do the dailies as much as we could. We stay in touch over Slack
daily
and everything else.
stand-ups getting hijacked pretty much by
they always just felt almost, yeah. And it felt like every time
not
we did a stand-up,
needs to be there.
One person wastes 15 minutes of time for everybody else.
Yeah.
When it's like, no, we're all good. Okay, peace. See you tomorrow. They just feel like they weren't as productive as they could be. So maybe we're doing them wrong, and that's totally a possibility.
I've seen it done so many different ways. People doing it like Slack stand-ups where they just kind of just in the room, like a stand-up room or whatever.
That's
but
good.
Yeah, I've seen so many different ways of doing it.
Yeah. So we're Agile Scrum right now.
Is it like a weekly
like
sprint planning?
Yeah,
or
it's usually
bi-weekly?
weekly. Okay. We have Monday meetings Monday. So Monday.com is a cool app we found to help manage all this. And so we have Monday where we all there's like hourly blocks set up for different team members and me to be involved
and stuff. That's cool.
Catch up on everything. So
just kind of get everything back on track and stuff.
Yep. So that's what we're doing right now. I've built a couple different management softwares over the years to help us keep stuff on track. That was one of my strengths at Tingy was I organized a lot of the workflow over there. I implemented a lot of that same strategy into what we do here, but we don't even use that as much anymore. We're kind of in this flux right now. So it's an interesting time to ask that question because we're only like 5 months in. Yeah, about 6 months probably into the whole Scrum Agile stuff. So far so good, and hopefully it sticks for a long time. Yeah. Should be good.
So now, obviously, you're doing a lot of WordPress, so PHP and all that kind of stuff. But that probably wasn't your first language, right?
If you don't count spreadsheets, then it actually was. So my first programming language was after we started NeONBRAND. No, actually, before we started NeONBRAND, I built Flippin' first website, and it was a WordPress PHP custom theme, 100% custom. Didn't just install a theme. I installed I installed the basic theme and made this super ugly, crappy WordPress website. But that's what I did.
That's what you learned, yeah.
Yeah, so that was where I started, and then from there, it was more and more WordPress websites getting piled on top.
But that was PHP 4 or 5?
5 is where it started.
So you got in when finally things got good.
Yeah.
4 was terrible.
Yeah, and it's funny because I joke with our actual PHP developers, and this is, I'm sure, a community-wide thing. I know WordPress. I don't know PHP. Like, every day he comes in and he's like, check out this. And I'm like, mind blown because that's awesome. And that's a PHP thing. I know the codex for WordPress almost backwards and forwards, which are all its own custom functions for WordPress.
My gosh, yeah.
But I don't know the PHP stuff. And so it's a disadvantage or an advantage, I don't necessarily know. But I tend to be a super user on anything I use. And so even though I haven't figured out the PHP stuff, that's where I can really figure out the WordPress stuff. Which makes me a PHP guy, I guess.
It's almost better that you don't know the PHP stuff first because I've cornered myself. I've used JSON decode and didn't know there's like a version of that.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the nice parts about our current setup with our employees is we have a good PHP guy, and he'll come in and ask, I do this all the time in PHP. Is there a better way? And I'll be like, oh yeah, check this out. Bam, WordPress function that does all the work he was trying to do for him. Yeah. So it's a good balance, but I do get what you're saying. Yeah, there's a black hole that can happen if you don't know the WordPress functions. You can end up writing a lot of stuff that's already been taken care of by a WordPress function.
Yeah. So you have a lot of in-house guys now. You don't do anything really outsourced?
Ever since I realized how crappy the websites we were getting early days were, I became the developer, and then we hired guys to work in-house with us so we don't outsource. Yeah. We don't outsource anything right now. We try to keep, even if we have to contract somebody, we prefer them be in-house contracted and hanging out with us to get the project done. So most of it's done here.
Yeah. Cool. And so going back a little bit, what was kind of like your first dream job that you had when you were young?
That's interesting.
Mine was astronaut.
That's pretty good. Pretty good. Mine early on was probably a BMX bike guys.
Yeah.
I rode
BMX.
I rode BMX a lot.
I rode skateboards a lot.
Okay, yeah. I had seen you on skateboards and stuff.
Dude.
Yeah. I still have my BMX bike. We did some crazy stuff back in the day. It was early on.
Jumps?
So, oh, yeah. Did
you grind down any rails?
Oh, yeah. All that stuff. Yeah. I mean, we were.
Cool. You got video?
Oh, yeah. It's on my Kenny Eliason YouTube channel.
There you go.
It's old stuff, but it's on there. I ripped it off the old VHS to CD or cassettes or whatever they're called, tapes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did that forever, and I was pretty obsessed. And that would have been my first
Did you get like a wicked injury that took you out? Or?
No, I got old and fat. That was pretty much the extent of it. I broke a collarbone once. That was probably the worst injury, but
you started biking
aged
again.
out.
Yeah. Okay.
So I did the mission thing again. Not that keeps coming up, but I took my BMX bike on my mission. So I was one of those white, black name tag missionaries riding around, but I had my BMX. Sure. And so I did the jumps in the skate parks on my mission. And then when I came home, I kept doing it, but I was crazy, but not crazy enough to do the insane tricks that people started to do. So I just kind of aged out.
Backflips.
But now I never did. That was like a brand new thing right at the end of when I was doing tricks. So I never did that.
Have you seen motocross? It's on a whole new level.
I'm super obsessed. I watch Nitro Circus on the regular. So I'm obsessed with those guys. But now I got a 6-year-old boy who's totally into it. So I'm living through him. That's what I do.
Yeah. The Monster Truck thing's coming up in March.
We go every year.
Yeah? Okay, it's my first year, actually.
Oh, dude, it's the best.
Yeah.
It's the
my
best.
son will love it.
It's the weirdest thing. It's totally like a redneck, crazy thing that people do. But it is amazing watching those huge trucks fly through the air.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was watching these few YouTube videos. Again, going back, not even motocross, but monster trucks are getting technical with their
It's amazing.
tricks.
I mean, double backflips.
And
doubles. Or a backflip with a twist on a freaking monster truck. I don't get it.
No.
I've gone to that.
Dude.
It's always Monster Jam's always right by my birthday, and so for the past 6 years, I've bought Monster Jam tickets for my birthday.
Yeah.
And take my kids and go. So it's fun.
Even with skateboarding, I was like, I can't keep up with these guys. Seeing some of the tricks and just people wiping out, you get one bad move.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, that prefrontal cortex develops a little bit more.
Motocross is a whole new level, though. You mess up once in that, and that's game over. And that's one thing I was trying to communicate to someone was there's not really home run moments for programming where I guess when you're doing something with a client and they're like, hey, would they call you up and they're like, you're amazing.
Which happens once every million times.
That is kind of the closest you'll get in computer science. So I nailed this.
I bet you the comparison, because I agree with you, and I haven't ever thought about this. This just came to mind. The comparison would be something like $1 million acquisition or multi-million-dollar acquisition, which are so rare, right?
Sure,
that just doesn't happen very often.
But you're just
because you're right on the regular. Yeah, exactly. Yes, I did it.
I've been working for the last 10 years.
Exactly. That would be the only similarity. But you can't do that every day. You can do a double backflip on a dirt bike and feel that adrenaline rush. It's definitely a slower pace, but I get what you're saying.
I guess, so you're obviously, and even with astronaut, it was hard for me to fulfill my dream of a dream job. But now, even with my kids, I'm I see a lot of people who have amazing jobs that just, whether it did exist or didn't or whatever, because now I'm seeing people who are flipping stuff for a living. They're literally going to garage sales and flea markets and all this other stuff, and they found this little niche where they can just flip stuff. Now you've got this whole Instagram, you're up and all over social, so you see this evolving, but Instagram is huge, you know. It seems like a lot of Snapchat's slowly dying, it seems like, but Instagram is just on a whole new level.
Totally.
In fact, I was this close to streaming on Instagram TV for
cool.
this, but I didn't want to do,
audio and stuff. Yeah,
it was just a pain. But those mediums I can see becoming even more popular, and people are making a living producing content for these. These and. I've got a couple hundred followers, and I see people who have thousands of followers, but every day they're pushing out great content. And but it's hard, I guess, also trying to make sure that you have a path to monetize yourself too with these influencers and things that too.
For sure. And I think especially with Facebook and Instagram, they're pushing more on the non-ad revenue model and more the product placement or sponsored content model, like Dude Perfect. They do a partnership with Tire Rack and that's how they get paid. The video streams for free, and Facebook picks up the ad revenue. They got paid because they did the sponsorship with the other company. I think that's what Facebook is pushing more. But it is different, man. It's interesting that, I mean, could you imagine having to work on the team that supports, IGTV or whatever, like, because so many people's livings depend on you making sure that product works every single day. I mean, it's pretty interesting that they've created such an ecosphere that can maintain that.
Dude, like they accidentally released that feature of the horizontal
thing.
Yeah. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it was on for like a split second.
Yeah.
But it blew up on the internet.
Yeah.
And I didn't even get the chance to see it. But it's like...
It's crazy.
Amazing how, you're right, it's completely just built into the fabric of society.
It is now.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Facebook made some good plays there.
Oh, by buying that. Instagram? Yeah, I remember Gary Vee, he was saying, that's cheap for like a billion or whatever.
Yeah, it was an insane amount, but he's like, they got a deal.
Yeah. And then
and
now,
he was right.
I'm sure the Snapchat guy's wishing he sold them too.
Oh, you bet he is, man. That's a weird whole conversation right there. Like,
yeah.
You misstepped that one, bro.
Yeah. I mean, speaking, what do you see for the future of social? Do you kind of see the same trajectory for Instagram, them continuing to grow? And
it's going to be really hard to dethrone Facebook and Instagram. I mean, they not only have the money, but they got the traffic. And for that to go away, it's going to take some serious, like, scandal or something that's going to make everybody leave in mass exodus. Otherwise, they're just going to keep releasing new features till the end of days, and
the best thing
we're
they
going to
ever
keep
did
loving
was the
them.
stories. They jacked the stories from Snapchat.
Right.
They're like, cool feature, we're building
Done.
it. Yeah.
Like, forget about it. So don't move into the social media network space unless you got some strong patents going on, because otherwise they'll just swallow you up. No big deal.
Seems
brutal. They'll be around for a long time. I would be surprised. I mean, I've seen a few over the past few years. They gain a few, maybe 100,000 users, but ultimately they just get either swallowed up or people abandon them because not enough friends are on those networks.
Right.
Everybody's on Facebook and Instagram.
Bingo.
Everybody's there. I mean, even Google just gave up Google Plus finally. Like, they knew that they weren't going to compete.
Which is an interesting move.
Yeah, for sure. But they just didn't have the.
It's like Google Wave they got rid of too, which was a weird product.
Remember that? That Wave was awesome though back in the day, and then they ditched that too. The Google Plus had to do with the programming error that they had in it for a long time, and instead of fixing it and going back, they're just like, let's shut it down, forget this.
Yeah, and it got so weird. I remember somebody saying, he's like, the way that Google manages users now is just like very Frankenstein.
Yeah.
You know how like you have all of that like U3 and like how it switches. I heard from a developer internally, it's kind of chaotic.
Interesting.
How they handle all of that.
Interesting.
But yeah. Anyway, so. What are kind of some future jobs you see springing up that maybe didn't exist a little while ago? I know influencer is one that I've kind of...
That's true. That's a surprise. Yeah, that one is...
I've kind of been taken... but...
My cousin's an influencer, quote unquote, and gets paid sponsorship stuff all the time. He has a few 100,000 followers and posts crap every day, and it's amazing. And that's one I wouldn't have seen coming for sure. Like, the power of posting good stuff on your social networks is definitely something new. As far as other things showing up, I don't know, man. Like, more and more there's a need for solid graphic work for us, especially. Mm-hmm. I mean, creative minds are hard to come by, and so as we try to invent new things or show new websites, it's important to have somebody that can see outside of the box and come up with something new that still looks good. I mean, the way that Johnny Ive changed Apple with some of his designs, it's hard to find somebody with that vision artistically to make moves that don't look like every other thing that's out there. So graphics is a hard one. That'll become more important. I don't think it's a new job necessarily.
But that does bring up a good point that as computers automate old jobs that existed, one thing I've read is the jobs that will never go away are the artists, the creative minds, because simply put, computers just can't do it.
Yeah, right.
One of the best UX UI guys I know, Enoch, who he's worked for Caesars and some other great places.
Oh yeah, he was at Startup Weekend.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He does like graffiti art and
cool.
like illegal stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff. But he does it. He works at like the airbrush place here, and he does like amazing work. I've seen some of his canvases and stuff like that. And to see him translate that into a digital format and to be able to pull all of that into that world and making a living out of that is amazing.
That's pretty cool.
He can really kind of like do the best of both worlds, where he still can express himself artistically by creating his own content, but at the same time that can transfer into something where he's making a living and he's not having to worry about his next paycheck and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, technology, hopefully if we're doing technology right, it should make everything, it should be a magnifying glass to the human traits that we already have. So if we're really good at doing art, hopefully we can put some technology on top of that, maybe by switching to an iPad for your drawing utensils instead of a pen and paper, and now all of a sudden you can make your art even cooler, you can sell it easier, or whatever, you can print it easier, whatever it might be. So if we're doing technology right, it'll just be a good magnifying glass to what we're already doing, which eliminates some of the current jobs that we have probably to an extent, but it also creates a lot of opportunities for us to hopefully replace tasks that were otherwise monotonous and could be done robotically or by a machine, and fill those times up with hopefully better things like spending time with our families and, doing the things that matter most, essentially. But we'll see, man. It's an interesting time. We live in the future, but there's still a lot of future ahead. Yeah. I mean, you go to CES and it's like we live in the future. It's here, like today.
Totally.
But as it gets more into our daily lives, it's going to be interesting to see how it works out.
Well, I think it's just the fact is it's not mainstream quite yet on some of this really cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to start to see it more, especially in like brick and mortar stores, I feel like. But there was this mirror I was looking at. I'm sure you've seen it, but like you can change your color of your hair, add accessories on your head, and you're moving around, you're waving your hair, and it's like legit. You can change it. Yeah, I could totally see my wife using something like that in a department store and like trying different dresses on. Yeah, totally. And especially if they can translate that right into getting it to work off your phone or a laptop, they don't need additional hardware.
Mind-blowing. Super cool stuff. Super cool opportunities for all that kind of creativity.
Voice is getting huge,
Voice is huge.
100 million Alexa devices have been sold, and so I know I've got a few at my house, but
listening to us all the time.
Just as self-driving, I know people are paranoid of it listening all the time.
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those things where I've just like kind of
it's interesting. I mean, we give up a little bit of privacy for the convenience, and I think I've joked about this forever. Anything that we can do to make America fatter will be ultimately successful. And you think of fatter, laziness, whatever it might be, and it's that kind of thing. Like I don't want to have to get my computer out to reorder the thing that I always order. That it's easier for me. So that is going to be a winning device. Whether or not I'm giving up a little bit more privacy or not, ultimately, okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Because it makes my life a little bit easier.
Exactly.
That's the trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of like VR, AR, one thing I recently saw is there's this thing called The Void, which I want to check out. I haven't done it yet, but you put on these VR goggles, and it's like this maze. It's like a legit maze, but then they overlay, when you put these goggles on, like you're in a castle and you're fighting dragons and all this other stuff. But when you're touching the wall, it's like a real wall, in the game. So you can legit like walk around in a 3D space and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Building games and stuff like that, and it looks like you guys even have a Unreal meetup tonight.
Yeah, tomorrow night. Tonight?
Is it the 16th? Right, tonight. I think
you're
it
right.
is or
It's
something.
tonight.
Yeah.
Yes. That's right.
But
go check my calendar.
that stuff becoming like game development's huge. That's one thing actually that got me into programming was game development. I just never had the opportunity to work for like a game shop. I just got kind of sucked into websites and all that. That's where the money was, right? Or at least, I mean, there's money in games too, but it's funny. It's a different world, just with the death march of getting a software release out. I was trying to communicate to someone earlier. It's like how good they have it because they can just deploy a release, on the fly. Versus imagine having to ship an NES cartridge and there's a bug in it.
Forget about it. Yeah, jeez, for sure. That's crazy to think. Yeah, that's interesting.
So I'm gonna rattle off some of the little weird positions here I think are gonna pop up in the future, and you tell me what you think about them.
Okay.
But so urban farmer, okay, so like growing stuff off of buildings and stuff like that, because agriculture is gonna be. I hear it's a huge demand.
Yeah, right. I've seen that around for sure. That sounds like a very feasible future job that nobody would have ever seen. I'll give you that one.
It just depends on what they're farming, I guess, right?
Probably be weed for the majority of the starters.
Mental health, a big thing in the future, just additional counselors, therapists, researchers, more research into that.
Yep. The more we disconnect from devices, because hopefully technology is making us better, the more we're going to realize how we're all screwed up, and so we're going to need more help.
Well, speaking, I guess Elon Musk was talking about releasing a device soon that you put on your head, and you could put on your head, and we can basically just start talking to each other without actually communicating, like talking.
Goodness gracious.
So then that brings communication to a whole new level.
Trip, man. Holy cow. Yeah.
But
that's cool.
One of them here is personality programmers, like programming AI and stuff.
Oh yeah,
like
for
that.
sure.
AI I haven't dealt with too much myself, but that seems like a huge.
One of our programmers the other day was telling us about. I think it was at Facebook. They had two chatbots communicating verbally to each other, and so it was listening and then speaking back and forth. Did you hear about this at all?
And they changed their language.
Yes.
And the programmers didn't know what they were saying.
So they unplugged it.
So they turned it off. I read it, and that is a perfect example of what AI will do.
Yes, right.
Given no
parameters, no restraints.
Why would they communicate in the same thing if they got this guy listening?
Takes too long.
In?
Yeah.
Let's start speaking bing bong. You know what I mean?
Crazy, man. Crazy.
But a few other. These are supposed to be 2025 is when these jobs will exist. Drone dispatchers. Okay, flying out in drones instead of like FAA guys or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Garbage miners.
So we're talking like
I guess going into landfills and getting.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll give you that one.
Weather coordinators, guys who can manipulate the weather.
Yeah, I mean that's already a thing, right? Isn't that what Trump does sometimes? I thought that's what they do. No, I don't know. I'm just messing.
Memory manipulation. So like Vanilla Sky. You ever seen that movie?
Yeah.
Like
that's
like
good.
erase a bad memory or something like that.
Yeah, that's good.
That would be trippy.
Those are good. Those are good.
I wonder if one day we will see some of those exciting things. But in the meantime, we'll continue to innovate.
Yep.
And
keep plugging along, right? That's what we do.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate having you on. Maybe in a year or so, let's have you on again, and we'll kind of get an update of what's going on. But appreciate hooking us up with the new space.
Yeah.
Profession Unknown's going to be recording from here at the Work in Progress from here on. So really appreciate that, and we'll look forward to the next one. So thank you so much,
Sounds
Kenny.
good. Yep. Take it easy.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Later, man.
Good.